Did you know that right now, millions of drivers across America are completely unaware of major new laws that could cost them hundreds, even thousands, of dollars starting in 2026? If you're someone who's been driving for decades and feels confident behind the wheel, this might surprise you. These aren't small, easy-to-miss changes. They're sweeping reforms that are reshaping how every single one of us drives, and the penalties for not knowing could hit your wallet hard. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share could genuinely save you money, stress, and a whole lot of trouble on the road. Now, before we get into all the details, I want you to imagine something for a moment. Picture yourself driving home on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Maybe you've just finished running a few errands, and everything feels perfectly normal. You stop at a red light, glance down at your phone for just a second to check the time, and suddenly you see those flashing blue and red lights in your rearview mirror. You didn't run a red light. You didn't speed. But in 2026, in many states across this country, that one brief glance at your phone is enough to get you pulled over, ticketed, and fined. That's not a scare story. That's the new reality millions of drivers are about to face. So let's start at the very beginning, because the changes happening in 2026 are not the result of one law passed overnight. They've been building for years, and the biggest wave is finally hitting us right now. One of the most talked about, and honestly, most controversial, changes comes from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, a massive piece of federal legislation that was signed into law back in 2021. Hidden inside that law is a mandate that requires all new passenger vehicles to eventually be equipped with technology that can passively monitor drivers for signs of impairment. We're talking about systems that can detect whether you've had too much to drink, or whether you're too drowsy to be safely behind the wheel. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking, and I'll be honest, a lot of people had that same reaction. The idea of a car that can decide whether or not you're allowed to drive sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, doesn't it? Maybe something from one of those old episodes of The Twilight Zone. But this is very real, and if the system detects impairment, it has the authority to limit or even completely prevent the vehicle from operating. Critics have been calling this a kill switch, and the term has stuck. In fact, the backlash was so strong that a bill was introduced in Congress, the No Kill Switches in Cars Act, specifically designed to repeal this mandate. Whether that bill succeeds or not remains to be seen, but the debate itself tells you just how significant this change really is. But let's set the kill switch debate aside for a moment, because there are changes happening right now, today, that are going to affect you far more immediately. Let's talk about hands-free driving laws, because this is where a lot of people are going to be caught completely off guard. For years, many of us were used to a kind of informal grace period. Officers might see you holding your phone and choose to let it go, or they could only pull you over if they first spotted another violation. Those days are largely over. In states like Florida, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, and many others, officers now have what's called primary enforcement authority. That means they can pull you over solely because you were holding your phone. Not texting. Not scrolling social media. Simply holding it. Even if you're sitting still at a red light. If you grew up in a time when phones were attached to walls and cars didn't have touchscreens, this can feel like a completely foreign world. But it's the world we're living in now, and the fines are nothing to shake a stick at. And it's not just phone use that's getting tightened up. Move over laws, the rules that require drivers to change lanes or slow down when they see emergency vehicles, have been expanded significantly. In California, for example, the law now covers any stationary vehicle with hazard lights on, not just police cars or ambulances. That means if someone breaks down on the side of the highway and turns on their flashers, you're legally required to move over or slow down. It's a common sense rule, really, but many drivers simply don't know it applies so broadly now, and that ignorance can be costly. Now here's something that I think is going to genuinely surprise a lot of people, because it surprised me when I first came across it. We've all seen speed cameras before, those fixed cameras at intersections that snap a photo if you run a red light. But what's expanding rapidly in 2026 is something called average speed monitoring. Here's how it works. Cameras are placed at the entry and exit points of certain zones, work zones, school zones, even stretches of highway. They record when your vehicle enters and when it exits. Then, using nothing more than basic math, they calculate how fast you must have been traveling to cover that distance in that amount of time. If the numbers don't add up, a ticket goes in the mail. States like Michigan, Illinois, and Indiana are leading this expansion, and the really important detail here is that in many cases, the ticket goes to the vehicle's owner, regardless of who was actually driving. So if your grandchild borrowed your car and had a heavy foot, you might be the one receiving that fine. Speaking of things that arrive in the mail, here's another change that caught a lot of people off guard. Some states are now using roadside sensors that can actually scan your vehicle's exhaust emissions as you drive past. You won't even know it's happening. But if your car is putting out more pollution than it should, a notice will show up at your door telling you to get it repaired. For anyone driving an older vehicle, this is something worth being aware of before a letter from the state shows up unexpectedly. Now let's talk about something that affects your registration and insurance, because these are two areas where the new automated systems are really showing their teeth. In New York and several other states, insurance verification has gone fully electronic. There are now real-time databases that can instantly flag whether your vehicle has a lapse in coverage. And if it does, your registration can be suspended immediately, not after a warning, not after a grace period, but right away. For anyone who's ever let their insurance lapse even briefly, maybe between switching providers, or during a tough financial month, this is a critical change to understand. And then there's the matter of license plates. Now, this might sound like a small thing, but in Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware, there are now stricter standards for how visible your plate must be to automated camera systems. If a camera can't clearly read your plate, you could face a fine. And in California, deliberately obscuring or altering your plate can now cost you up to $1,000. $1,000, for a dirty or covered plate. Again, these laws exist because so much enforcement is now automated. The cameras are doing the work that officers used to do, and if your plate isn't readable, the whole system breaks down. Now, for those of you who've made the switch to an electric vehicle, or are thinking about it, there's something important you need to factor into your budget. For years, one of the financial benefits of driving an EV was that you weren't paying gas taxes, which is one of the main ways states fund road maintenance. Well, states noticed that gap in their budgets, and over 40 of them have now introduced or increased annual registration fees specifically for electric vehicles. We're typically talking somewhere between $100 and $200 per year. Oregon has gone even further, piloting a program where EV drivers pay a fee based on how many miles they actually drive. It's called a road usage charge, and it's being watched closely by other states as a potential model for the future. Now, I know we've covered a lot of ground here, and you might be feeling a little overwhelmed. That's completely understandable. These are significant changes, and when they all come at once, it can feel like the rules of the road have been completely rewritten. But here's the thing I want you to hold on to: knowing about these changes puts you miles ahead of the millions of drivers who are still completely unaware. Information is protection. And the fact that you're here, taking the time to stay informed, says a lot about the kind of responsible, thoughtful driver you are. Whether you've been driving since the days of bench seats and AM radio, or you just got your license a few years ago, these laws apply to everyone equally. The cameras don't check your driving record. The automated systems don't care how many years of clean driving you have behind you. But you, armed with what you now know, can navigate all of this with confidence, awareness, and the peace of mind that comes from being prepared. And in just a moment, we're going to wrap all of this up with some practical, straightforward steps you can take right now to make sure you're fully protected and ready for everything 2026 is bringing to the road. If you found this helpful, please give the video a thumbs up. It truly helps more people like you find this important information. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is a wonderful time to do so, because we regularly share updates that are especially relevant for experienced drivers. We'd also love to hear from you in the comments below. Have any of these changes already affected you, or is there something you'd like us to cover next? Your voice matters here, and we read every single comment.